My name is Marianne Holt. I was 62 when my husband Grant slid a signed prenup across a polished conference table and told me, in a voice that sounded almost bored, that I would be leaving our marriage with nothing but my clothes. He did not throw it at me. He did not yell. And he did not even look ashamed. He tapped the top page with one finger, like the paper was a polite little employee delivering bad news. "This was signed years ago," he said. "You agreed." The problem was, I did not remember signing any prenup. Not at 22, not at 42, not ever. What I did remember was waking up groggy after an outpatient procedure, my mouth dry, my thoughts thick and slow, and Grant hovering too close with documents we needed to take care of. And what I had, sitting in a manila folder on my side of that table, was the one thing he could not talk his way around. The prenup itself, because the ink on my signature was too young to be telling the truth. I did not come into that meeting to beg, and I did not come to be reasonable. I came to place one clean fact into a room full of witnesses and watch a man lose the power he had been quietly collecting for years. Grant thought I would keep things private. I kept the proof instead. Our house was not a mansion. It was a solid, comfortable place in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of house you buy when you plan to stay. Neutral siding, a porch light that always worked because I changed the bulbs, and a garage full of holiday bins I labeled in black marker: fall, winter, tax, medical. That house held 30 years of my systems. People think retired banker means I spent my life wearing sharp blazers and saying no to loans. The truth is less glamorous and more useful. I spent decades watching what happens when people do not read what they sign, and what happens when one spouse handles all the accounts for simplicity. I did not let that happen to us. Every month of our marriage had its place. Mortgage payments, insurance renewals, property taxes, retirement contributions that moved like clockwork because I set them up and never forgot them. I kept a file cabinet in the hallway with hanging folders that squeaked on their metal rails. When you pulled them out, the sound was familiar to me, the way some women know the sound of a mixer in a kitchen. Grant benefited from all of it without ever learning the shape of it. When his business had tight months, he would come home and stand in the kitchen doorway while I was rinsing dishes. He would say, "Can you float us until next month?" Float us, like I was the ocean. I would wipe my hands on a towel, go to the office nook, and move money from savings to checking with the calm, boring confidence of a woman who refused to let the lights flicker. Grant would kiss my cheek, promise he would make it up, and the next day he would buy lunch for someone or order a new tool like the crisis had never existed. That was the texture of our marriage. Me patching, him taking comfort in the patch. And it was not only money. It was everything that kept a life running. When we needed new tires, Grant would sigh and say, "You are better at this. You know what is fair." When the medical bills came after my procedure, Grant waved his hand and said, "Just handle it, Maury. You keep us organized." He said it like a compliment, but it always came with the same quiet assumption. What I managed was not mine. It was ours when it benefited him, and it was mine when it was work. I do not say that to paint myself as a saint. I loved being competent. I loved knowing where things were, and I liked the security of order. But there is a difference between being organized and being used. I had worked too long, saved too carefully, and kept too many promises to myself to be pushed into a small apartment at 62 because A, man decided I was now an expense. That was the stake, plain and physical. The house, my retirement, and the right to not have my future rewritten by someone who had spent years letting me carry the weight, then acting like I should be grateful for the privilege. Grant did not understand what he was asking me to do. He thought he was asking me to accept a document, but he was asking me to accept erasure. And before I tell you how I proved it, you need to understand the pattern that made him bold enough to try. Grant never yelled when he wanted control. He reframed, and that was his favorite skill. If I asked why money was missing from our checking account, he would lean back in his chair, smile like I was being cute, and say, "Why are you stressing? You always do this." It is handled. If I asked where a payment went, he would blink slowly and say, "Mary, you of all people should know mistakes happen. Do not turn it into a thing." He could make a question sound like an accusation. He could make my attention to detail sound like a personality flaw. And he did it with a pleasant voice, the kind people believe. He also had a talent for calling himself thoughtful while walking me toward a corner. "Let us keep things simple," he would say whenever I wanted clarity. Simple meant I did not ask too many questions. Simple meant he did not have to explain. Simple meant I stayed quiet because arguing felt exhausting. Over time, I learned when to let him talk and when to let him tire himself out. I learned what was worth a fight and what was worth a note in my head. I did not know I was training for something bigger. The day of my procedure, an outpatient thing, nothing dramatic. I remember the brightness of the waiting area and the paper bracelet on my wrist. I remember a nurse's voice telling me not to make big decisions for the next 24 hours because of the sedation, and I remember nodding like a good patient. I remember waking up afterward feeling like my brain was wrapped in cotton. At home, the afternoon light slanted through the living room blinds. The quiet felt too loud, and I was on the couch with a blanket pulled to my chin, trying to sip water. Grant sat at the coffee table with a stack of papers. "Just a few things we need to handle while you are home," he said. I remember looking at the papers and not being able to focus on the words. They slid on the page, my mouth tasted like plastic, and my hands felt heavy. "What is it?" I asked. "Just normal stuff," he said. "We have been meaning to take care of it. It will make everything easier." And because I trusted him then, because he was my husband and I was foggy and I wanted to go back to sleep, I let him put documents in front of me. I remember holding a pen and feeling my fingers clumsy around it. I remember Grant's voice, gentle and insistent, explaining without really explaining. "You do not have to read all that," he said. "It is standard." I did not sign anything that I can recall. I truly do not. But I remember his insistence, the way he watched my hand, and the way he kept saying, right there, like I was a cashier and he was a customer in a hurry. That memory sat in the back of my mind for years, like a pebble in a shoe. Not painful enough to stop walking, but always there. Then, months later, when Grant decided our marriage was now a negotiation, I saw the pebble for what it was. The first time Grant mentioned divorce, it was not a fight. It was a conversation he tried to run like a meeting. We were in the kitchen, the fridge hummed, and a pot of coffee that neither of us poured sat cooling on the counter. Grant stood with his arms crossed and said, "We have grown apart. We should handle this like adults." Handle? Like a task. I stared at him, waiting for the part where he said something human. He did not. He slid an envelope across the counter, and it made a soft, dry sound against the laminate. "Here is what we agreed to," he said. Inside was a copy of a prenup. I read the header twice. The date at the top claimed it had been signed over a decade ago. The terms were simple in a way that felt cruel. Grant's business would remain his, the house would be his, and my claim would be minimal, something that barely covered a moving truck and first month's rent. My eyes went to the signature line. My name was there, Marianne Holt, written in looping strokes that looked like mine if he did not look too closely. Grant watched me like he was waiting for a predictable reaction. Tears, anger, begging, anything that gave him the upper hand. Instead, I heard myself say, "I do not remember this." Grant shrugged, like memory was optional. "You signed it. It is done." I kept reading because that is what I do when something is wrong. I do not perform, I read. The copy was clean and bright, like it had been printed yesterday. The edges were too sharp, the signature looked too dark, and I held it closer and noticed something that made my stomach tighten. Not fear, exactly, but recognition. The ink looked new. Not printed new. Ink pen new. Glossy in places where the light hit it, sitting on top of the paper instead of being absorbed by time. I know what old signatures look like. I spent years watching people sign forms under fluorescent office lights, and I watched those same forms come back months or years later, handled and filed and rubbed by fingers. Ink changes when it lives in a drawer. It dulls. It settles. This signature did not look settled. Grant started talking again, filling the space. "This protects my business," he said. "You knew that." "You have always understood we had to keep certain things separate." He said separate like I had not been paying the mortgage. He said protect like he was not trying to strip me down. I did not argue with him in the kitchen. I did not say, "You are lying," and I did not say, "Are you really doing this?" Because the person who wants a fight does not want the truth. He wants the noise. I folded the copy once carefully and slid it back into the envelope. "I need to see the original," I said. Grant's expression flickered for half a second, then the pleasant mask returned. "Sure," he said. "We will get it. This is all standard. Do not make it ugly. Do not make it ugly." He had already made it ugly. He just did not want it visible. That night, I went to the hallway file cabinet and pulled out the medical folder from the year of my procedure. The rails squealed, a small protest. I flipped through discharge papers until I found the printed instructions. Black ink on white paper. A line near the middle that told me not to sign legal documents for 24 hours because of sedation. I did not clutch it like a weapon. I laid it on the desk and stared at it until my eyes went dry. Then I pressed my thumbnail into my palm, hard enough to feel the sting, and I made myself do what I had taught people to do for years. I treated it like a fraud case. I did not need 10 theories. I needed one chain of proof. Wrong detail, first record, verification, public placement, consequence. The next morning, I called my attorney. I am not going to dress that up. When you are married to someone who is willing to use paper against you, you do not try to communicate better. You protect yourself. My attorney listened without interrupting. When I said I wanted to inspect the original prenup, she did not sound surprised. She sounded tired, like she had heard the same kind of confidence from the same kind of man. "We will request it formally," she said. "No scans. The original." Grant did not like that. He texted once, one line, "Why are you doing this?" He did not ask if I was okay, and he did not ask how I was feeling. He asked why I was not cooperating. I did not respond. I refused to give him anything he could screenshot and twist into. Marianne is being irrational. Marianne is being difficult. Let him think I was just being stubborn. Stubborn women are annoying. Prepared women are dangerous. A week later, I sat in my attorney's office with the blinds half open, light slicing across the carpet in pale stripes. The office smelled faintly like coffee and printer toner. My attorney placed a folder on the desk. "They produced an original for inspection," she said. The word original should have brought relief. Instead, it brought focus. She opened the folder and slid the prenup toward me. I picked it up with both hands. The paper was crisp, not aged, not softened by years. It had that stiff feel of something recently handled, recently stored in a clean place. The staple marks at the top left were sharp, not rusted, not stretched. I held it near the window light, turning it slightly, and there it was again. The signature, Marianne Holt, dark, rich, glossy in places, sitting on top of the paper like frosting. The date at the top claimed it had been signed over a decade ago, but the ink looked like it had been laid down yesterday. I brought my face closer, not dramatic, just careful. I traced the loops with my eyes. The first letter of my first name had a hesitation in it. A tiny stop where the pen seemed to pause, then continue. That is not how I sign. I sign fast. I sign without thinking. I sign like someone who spent years signing forms at a desk and never making a show of it. This signature looked like someone drawing my name. I lowered the document and looked at my attorney. "It is wrong," I said quietly. She nodded once. "That is a feeling. We need proof." "I know," I said. "Ink?" She raised an eyebrow. "Ink?" I tapped the signature line gently with my finger. "The ink looks new," I said, "and the strokes do not feel like me." My attorney leaned closer and examined the signature. "We can consult a forensic document examiner," she said. "If the date is false, that changes everything." Remember that phrase, changes everything, because it was not about drama. It was about power. A valid prenup would have boxed me in. A fraudulent prenup would box him in. I asked to see the document again. I studied the pages like they were a bank statement. I noted the way the paper sat, and I noted the smell. Clean, almost sharp. Not like paper that had lived in a basement box through humid summers and dry winters. Grant had built his whole plan on one assumption: I would not question the paper. He forgot who he married. I did not leave that office with a speech. I left with an appointment. The forensic document examiner's office was quieter than I expected. No dramatic lab, no bright lights, just a clean desk, a computer monitor, and a lamp that could be angled low over a page. The air had that neutral scent of paper and dust-free carpet. The examiner, professional and calm, shook my hand and asked for the document. I watched her hands when she handled it, not rough, not precious, like she had seen 1,000 versions of the same lie. She placed the prenup under the lamp and looked through a magnifying tool. She did not start with big conclusions. She started with small observations, the kind that build something solid. "Do you typically sign with pauses?" she asked. "No," I said. "I sign quickly." She nodded and pointed to a spot in the first name. "This shows hesitation. It can indicate someone copying a signature." I swallowed once, not because I was shocked, but because hearing it said aloud made my skin tighten. She moved to the end of my last name. "Notice these pen lifts," she said. "Your signature breaks here, here, and here. A natural signature often flows." She was not telling me a story. She was giving me a map. Then she got to what I cared about most: ink age. She explained it in plain language because she knew I was not there for a science lecture. Certain inks change over time, she said. They settle. Components evaporate. The way ink sits on paper changes. We can sometimes tell if something is consistent with the claimed age, or if it behaves more like recent writing. She did not promise a magic number. She did not say, "This was written on Tuesday at 3:14 in the morning." She said something better. She said the ink on that signature was inconsistent with the date printed on the document. Too young, too fresh, not living where it claimed to have lived. She examined the document again, then looked up at me. "I can prepare a written report," she said. "My findings will be careful. I do not do dramatic. I do defensible." "Do it," I said. When I left her office, the parking lot was bright and ordinary. Cars came and went. Someone's muffler rattled as they pulled out, and life moved like nothing had changed. But something had. Grant's plan was no longer a story he could tell. It was a claim he had to prove, and he could not. Waiting for the report took a week. I filled that week the way I have always filled anxious time, with action. I did not call Grant. I did not warn him, and I did not try to catch him in a lie on the phone, because lies are slippery when they are only spoken. Documents are not slippery. I went back through my procedure folder and clipped the discharge instructions into a neat stack. I wrote a one-page timeline on plain paper, procedure day, sedation warning, the memory of papers on the coffee table, the appearance of the prenup, Grant's claim that it was signed years ago. No dramatics, dates, facts. I asked my attorney one question that mattered. When he tries to talk over me, I said, "Can you make him answer yes or no questions?" My attorney's mouth tightened in a way that made me think she had dealt with men like Grant too often. "Yes," she said, "and we will make sure the mediator understands the issue." That was the goal. Not to yell louder than Grant, but to make a neutral person see the truth without needing to believe me. During that week, Grant left a voicemail late one night. I stood in the kitchen in the dark, the phone glowing in my hand, listening. His voice sounded wounded, soft, almost tender. "Mari," he said, "I do not know why you are doing this. We can handle this like adults. I do not want it to get ugly. I am trying to be fair." Fair. He used that word like a bandage, like if he said it enough times, it would cover the bruise he was trying to leave. I wanted to call him back. I wanted to say, "You pushed papers at me when I was sedated. You built a whole exit plan and thought I would smile and accept it." I wanted to drive to his office and lay the prenup on his desk, loud enough for his staff to hear the thud. Instead, I opened my notes app and typed the response I wanted to leave on his voicemail. I typed it twice, then I deleted it. Because anger would give him a scene. Proof would give me a ruling. I wrote that sentence on a sticky note and pressed it onto the front of my folder like a tab, the kind you see in a tidy office. The day the examiner's report arrived, I did not open it like a suspense novel. I opened it like a bank letter. I sat at the dining table with a glass of water. The house was quiet except for the tick of the wall clock and the distant whir of the dishwasher finishing its cycle. I read the report once, then I read it again, slower. The language was careful, exactly as promised. It did not scream fraud. It did not throw accusations. It laid out observations, signs of simulation, hesitation marks, stroke patterns inconsistent with a natural signature, and ink characteristics inconsistent with the claimed age of the document. The words that stuck were simple, inconsistent with the stated date. That was it. That was my lever. I printed 2 copies, one for me, one for my attorney. I clipped the report behind the prenup copy and placed the discharge instructions behind that. Then the timeline. I did not need a mountain. I needed a clean stack. Mediation was scheduled downtown at the law office. Neutral ground, neutral walls, neutral people whose job was to keep things moving. Grant thought neutrality would protect him. He thought my discomfort would make me fold. On the morning of mediation, I got dressed slowly. Not like I was going to war, like I was going to an appointment that mattered. I chose simple clothes, nothing performative. I made coffee and did not drink it. My stomach did not want it. I placed my folder in my bag and set my keys beside it. Then I stood in the hallway and looked at the file cabinet one more time. The labeled folders, the clean order of a life I built. I did not know exactly how the day would end, but I knew I was done letting Grant narrate my reality. The drive downtown took 20 minutes. The sky was bright. Traffic moved in its usual impatient rhythm, and I kept both hands on the wheel, feeling the texture of the leather. Grant arrived at the law office before me. That did not surprise me. He liked being early when he thought he was winning. He liked to sit in the room first, to make it feel like his. The receptionist pointed me toward the conference room. The hallway smelled like carpet cleaner and stale air conditioning, and my shoes made small, controlled sounds on the tile. When I walked into the mediation room, I registered everything the way I always do when something matters. Beige walls, a long conference table, a bowl of wrapped mints at the center that looked untouched, and a pitcher of water with plastic cups stacked beside it. The air conditioner clicked on and off overhead like it could not decide what temperature humans deserved. The mediator sat centered at the far side of the table, a legal pad in front of her. My attorney sat to my left. Grant sat across from me, angled slightly outward, one arm draped over the back of his chair like he owned it. His attorney placed the prenup on the table in front of them, not tossed, not slammed, presented, like a verdict. Grant's face held that familiar pleasantness, the one he used when he wanted outsiders to see him as reasonable. He nodded at me once like we were coworkers. The mediator began with a few standard sentences about the process. I did not listen closely. I watched Grant. He kept glancing at the prenup as if it was a shield. The mediator asked each of us to state our positions. Grant went first. He spoke smoothly about fairness, about protecting his business, about how we had agreed years ago. He used words like mutual, understood, standard, and he did not look at me when he said those things. He looked at the mediator, because the mediator was the audience that mattered. When he finished, he leaned back slightly, satisfied. The mediator turned to me. "Mrs. Holt," she said, "do you dispute the prenup?" My hands were folded on the table. My folder sat closed in front of me. I did not clutch it, and I did not touch it yet. I looked at the mediator, then at Grant. "Yes," I said, "and I brought the reason." Grant's smile tightened at the corners. His eyes flicked to my folder, then away, like looking directly at it might make it real. The mediator nodded. "Go ahead. This is where men like Grant expect women like me to tremble or rant. They expect emotion, because emotion is easy to dismiss." I did not give him that. I opened my folder and slid out the forensic examiner's report first. I placed it flat on the table and pushed it toward the mediator with 2 fingers, slowly, keeping it straight so it did not skew or curl. Then I placed the prenup beside it, aligned edge to edge like an exhibit. The paper made a soft whispering sound against the tabletop. That sound was small, but it was the sound of control shifting. The mediator adjusted her glasses and read the conclusion line once. Then she read it again, her pen hovering above the legal pad without moving. Grant's attorney leaned forward to look, then stopped half an inch short of touching the report, like his body refused to participate. Grant reached for the prenup instinctively, a reflex to pull it back into his space. My attorney placed her palm lightly on the paper first, not aggressive, not dramatic. A quiet boundary. Grant's hand froze in midair, then withdrew. I looked at him and delivered the line I had held in my mouth for days, keeping it from spilling out too early. You did not protect yourself with a prenup. You protected yourself with a date you could not defend. Grant's face changed in pieces. The smile failed first, then the color drained slightly from his cheeks. His eyes blinked too fast, the way people blink when they are trying to buy time. The mediator did not ask me how I felt, and she did not offer comfort. She did what neutral professionals do when they smell a serious problem. She turned to Grant and asked one clean question. "Where did this original come from?" she said. "And why does an examiner believe the ink is far younger than the document date?" Grant started talking. That is what he always did when cornered. He talked faster, and he added details nobody asked for. "It was a busy week," he said. "We had a lot going on. Marianne trusted me with paperwork. She knew what she was signing. Everyone signs things after appointments. This is being blown out of proportion." The more he explained, the worse it sounded. The mediator's pen finally moved. One short line, then it stopped again. Grant's attorney cleared his throat once, a small sound that carried more meaning than a speech. "Can we take a brief recess?" Grant's attorney asked. Not for strategy, for damage control. The mediator agreed, and we stood. Chairs scraped the tile. Someone's cup shifted against the table with a faint plastic squeak. Grant avoided looking at me as if eye contact would force him to admit I was real. In the hallway, Grant's attorney pulled him a few feet away, lowering his voice. I could not hear every word, but I did not need to. I saw the change. Grant's attorney's posture was no longer aligned with him. His shoulders angled away. His expression was tight and controlled, the expression of someone realizing they had been brought into a mess they were not told about. Grant gestured with one hand, chopping the air, insisting. His attorney shook his head once, sharply. "You did not tell me the truth. I did not hear the sentence, but I saw it." That was the first loss. Grant lost the room. Not because I yelled, because I placed something undeniable onto a table and let professionals do what they do when. Their time is being wasted by a lie. When we returned to the mediation room, the mood had changed without anyone naming it. The mints still sat untouched. The water pitcher still sweated onto the coaster. The air conditioner still clicked. But Grant's confidence had been punctured. The mediator spoke carefully. "Given the allegations raised by this report," she said, "I am not comfortable proceeding today under the assumption this prenup is valid." Grant opened his mouth. His attorney lifted a hand slightly, stopping him. That was the second loss. Grant lost support. The person he paid to protect his interests was now protecting his own reputation. My attorney leaned toward me and spoke low. "We are going to Holt," she said, "and we are filing to preserve assets and challenge this." I nodded once. I did not feel victorious. I felt clean. There is a difference. In the days that followed, my attorney moved quickly. I did not sit at home fantasizing about humiliation. I did what I have always done. I followed the process and let facts do their work. An emergency motion was filed to preserve assets and challenge the prenup based on fraud. I did not need to understand every line. I understood the purpose. Grant would not be allowed to move money around quietly while this was under review. When the judge granted a temporary order restricting Grant from moving money and revoked his unilateral access to key accounts, my attorney called me and told me in plain language, "He cannot touch what he thinks he can touch," she said. I set my phone down on the table and exhaled through my nose. Not relief, exactly. More like my body releasing a tension it had been carrying without my permission. Grant called twice. I did not answer. He texted once. "This is insane." I did not respond. He did not get my voice. He did not get my emotion. He did not get anything to twist. And then the consequence became physical. A week after mediation, Grant went to the bank to do what he always did: act like the only adult in the marriage, the only one entitled to decide what happened next. That is what the banker told me later, when I came in. Not as gossip, as a fact. "He came in asking to move funds," the banker said, keeping her voice neutral. "We had to inform him he no longer has unilateral authority on those accounts, per the order." I pictured it clearly. Grant standing at the counter, expecting the usual deference, expecting his name to open doors. And the banker, politely and firmly, telling him the rules had changed. Not because I begged, because a document, his precious document, had turned against him. I did not go to the bank that day to celebrate. I went because I needed a clean start that did not require Grant's cooperation. The bank lobby smelled like polished floor cleaner and faint perfume, the kind of scent that tries to feel safe. The ceiling lights were bright enough to make everything look slightly too sharp. The banker brought me into a small office with a desk and 2 chairs. A little sign holder sat near the edge. A computer hummed softly. She slid a few forms toward me. I signed where I needed to sign, my real signature, fast and natural, no hesitation, no pen lifts. I opened a new account, in my name only. Not as a dramatic statement, as a boundary. When it was done, the banker placed a starter checkbook and a new debit card in front of me. The checkbook was plain. The paper had that faint texture you can feel when you run your thumb along it. I did. I ran my thumb along the top check and felt the edge catch slightly under my nail. Ordinary paper, ordinary ink, ordinary control. This is what power looks like when it is real. Not a speech, not a threat, a simple object that says, "I do not need your permission anymore." I placed the checkbook and debit card into my bag and stood. On my way out, I caught my reflection in the glass door for half a second. Same face, same age, same woman. But my shoulders sat differently, like I was not bracing. Grant did not get to rewrite our marriage with a forged signature and a convenient date. He did not get to use my sedated day as a shortcut to ownership. He tried to make me small with paper. And the paper, his paper, became the thing that exposed him. I walked back to my car, the sun warm on my arms, the parking lot loud with ordinary life. A shopping cart clanked against a curb somewhere. Someone laughed into their phone. A door shut. I sat behind the wheel for a moment before turning the key, not because I was overwhelmed, but because I wanted to feel the difference fully. For years, I kept things running so smoothly that Grant started to believe I existed to maintain his comfort. He built his plan on my silence, on my fatigue, on my desire to keep peace. He thought I would be embarrassed to challenge him. He thought I would accept the story he told. Instead, I placed a fact into a room of witnesses and watched him lose control in stages. First his credibility, then his support, then his access. That is what extreme consequences look like when they are earned. Not cruelty, not chaos. Clean certainty. So, I will ask you something, and I want you to answer it like you mean it. If your spouse produced a document you do not remember signing and said, "You agreed to this," would you argue? Or would you go find the one fact they cannot talk their way out of